Hi, everybody. So we have news that Bryan Freedman is being sued for malpractice. Before I get into that, though, I just want to quickly cover a couple of things. The Sourwitz recording still has not been unsealed yet. It will. It's just taking its time. I've had some people mention audio issues. I am really, really sorry about that. I am trying. I've tried a few different microphones. I've even had ACO help me and try to adjust settings and do all kinds of things. But unfortunately, some people are still experiencing problems. Others aren't, and I don't know why it's affecting some people and not others. All I can do is apologise and just ask everyone to bear with me. I've got a new Yeti microphone coming tomorrow. It's been recommended by a few people, so I bought one of them to see how it goes. If anyone's got any other suggestions, I'm really open to trying. But I have actually been working really hard on various things already. Also, the other thing is I've got people in my home today, so if there's background noise, I can't avoid that, and I'm really sorry. So I'll try and keep it as quiet as possible. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this. I've got some criticism, and that's not easy to do because I am very mindful that so Bryan Freedman is being sued by the estate of Travis Flores. Travis Flores was an activist for a campaigner for cystic fibrosis. He suffered from cystic fibrosis himself. Unfortunately, he passed away last year. And I am really mindful that we are talking about a complaint that involves a person who is now deceased and not here to speak for themselves. Will be incredibly respectful, and obviously the criticism, but I do have criticism of this complaint, which is being brought in on behalf of Travis Flores by, I believe, his partner or husband. So, you know, I am going to be voicing those criticisms, and that's not to be disrespectful. That's just what I think, as reported by the Hollywood Reporter, because I have not read the complaint. The complaint is not on PASAP because it is a state claim, a California state claim in the Superior Court, and I'm working on getting access to that. I do have the original complaint between Travis Flores and Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer. So Bryan Freedman was the former attorney for Travis Flores against Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer in a copyright infringement claim. So that is where all of this is stemming from. And I will be between this article and the PACE documents from the actual lawsuit to demonstrate and back up why I feel a particular way about something. But as it's reported by the Hollywood Reporter, which I do not take verbatim, I am going to be reacting to that. I will, when I get the complaint documents, I will look at them properly and then do a separate video on them. And we might find something in that makes more sense. However, I will just say that this article feels like a hit piece, a well-timed strategic hit piece on Bryan Freedman, because it does not just talk about the Travis Flores lawsuit or this action that is now being brought by his estate. It throws all of Bryan Freedman's past skeletons at him. So, and it feels, I've learned a lot from watching Ashley, Brianna Eve, that things don't happen by accident. That, if something is happening in the news whilst there is something else going on the docket, that it's usually done for a reason. There's some kind of distraction. There is something going on here, a PR battle at war here. So I put nothing past Blake Lively and her team. They are the most underhand people I've ever had to deal with. Her legal team are anyway. And let's not forget, Blake Lively is not above bringing in, past lawsuits to try and score points against the parties in this lawsuit. She hired Jed Wallace's lawyer to represent her against Jed Wallace in Texas, and referenced his lawsuit against Bam Margera. So she's not above bringing in past lawsuits. And we've also seen her bring in a whole deposition transcript of Vin Diesel and Bryan Freedman just to make Bryan Freedman look bad. So, yeah, that's the eyes I look at this through. Anyway, so it ends with us legal fallout. Baldoni lawyer Bryan Freedman sued for malpractice. Earlier this year, Justin Baldoni's attorney was forced to defend his earlier legal work against the actor. Now, the estate of the man he once represented opposite Baldoni has accused him of treachery. It's a really big, that's an over-dramatized word for this. The Ends With Us war has led to fresh fallout. Bryan Freedman, Justin Baldoni's high-profile attorney in his no-holds-barred litigation fight against Blake Lively. No-holds-barred, really? This sounds more like a WWE main event match. Is now facing a civil suit as well as a state bar complaint over the lawyer's handling of an interconnected Baldoni legal matter. I'm just going to put this out here. Blake Lively's lawyers are facing a state bar complaint as well from some of us content creators that she frivolously subpoenaed, including me. In a 2021 case against both Baldoni as well as his production company, Wayfarer Entertainment, that's since been settled, and I have something to say about that later. Freedman represented Travis Flores, a man with cystic fibrosis who alleged that the star's directorial debut, 5 Feet Apart, was a ripoff of his then client's own script, 3 Feet Distance. Both projects were romances about a couple living with the progressive genetic disease. Flores, who died in May 2024 from complications of cystic fibrosis, had years earlier appeared on the Baldoni-produced and hosted docuseries My Last Days about people with terminal illnesses. Now, this is a quote from Bryan Freedman that was in a news article. Over the years, I have learned what great people Justin and Wayfarer are, Freedman explained in a statement justifying his decision to subsequently represent Baldoni. The Flores case was resolved without any determination of liability on Justin's or Wayfarer or any other defendant's part. Since then, it has been further confirmed to me that Justin and Wayfarer are exceedingly honourable and highly ethical. Excuse me. Flores' husband, Clement Soyuri, sorry if I'm getting that wrong, I'm not quite sure, as the administrator of his partner's estate, filed a formal complaint in July with the California State Bar's Office of Trial Counsel in protest of Freedman's conduct. And on Wednesday, he filed a lawsuit in California State Court. The suit, filed on October the 8th, alleges malpractice, invasion of privacy, and defamation. It accuses Freedman of having inappropriately traded up from seriously ill client Flores to healthier client Baldoni. Then later, after Flores had died, the litigation accuses Freedman of publicly defending himself by betraying attorney-client confidences and misrepresenting the merits of Flores' own case in the media. In federal court, where the parties' copyright litigation was waged, attorney-client privilege survives a client's death. Freedman did not immediately return a request for comment. So I'm going to pause there because this is, at this point, that is pretty much the sum total of what they talk about with this new lawsuit. The rest is just, when Freedman was a student, when Freedman was 2 years old, he did this, and this, all these terrible things that Freedman has ever been accused of. So I'm going to address the actual lawsuit, the Flores lawsuit, with the Flores lawsuit. So I've got PACER. This is the actual the docket for the Flores lawsuit against Baldoni and Wayfarer. And there were many others, by the way. The article just makes it sound like it was just them two. It wasn't, and I'll show you all of that. Let's start with the first thing it said. The case was settled. It was. But I find it so disingenuous when people say that. It was settled by only one of the numerous parties. Okay. Let's look at the parties first. Travis Flores, an individual, as a plaintiff, versus Justin Baldoni, an individual. Caleb Remington. Caleb Remington was, I believe, a consultant. He is someone who also suffers from cystic fibrosis, and he was a consultant on the film 5 Feet Apart, I believe. Wayfarer Entertainment, now known as Wayfarer Studios, California Limited Liability Company. Well Entertainment, a partnership of unknown origin. So that's another entity. Lionsgate, we all know who they are, a California corporation. CBS Films, big company again. And then those 1 through 100 inclusive. So all of those defendants, right? This is defendant Caleb Remington's notice of settlement. To his honourable court, all parties and their attorneys of record, please take notice that plaintiff Travis Flores and defendant Caleb Remington have reached a settlement in principle. This is the only settlement in the entire case. The only settlement. So then the second point I wanted to go to was this one. You can see in the bold there, order granting stipulation to dismiss complaint as to defendants Justin Baldoni, Wayfarer Entertainment, Lionsgate Entertainment, and CBS Films. And these were collectively known as the film defendants. The other, there was other defendants, but when referring to these defendants specifically in, in the motion to dismiss, in the complaint, etc., these defendants were known collectively as the film defendants. Because there was another one, by this point, there was another one brought on, Ambry Genetics Corporation, in the defendants, which wasn't, they weren't a defendant at the time Caleb Remington's notice of settlement was filed. So this is what this says. On March 25th, 2022, plaintiff Travis Flores filed the subject stipulation to dismiss complaint, requesting the court dismiss the action with prejudice as to all remaining defendants. And all remaining defendants, as we just said, includes Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer. Having considered the stipulation and finding good cause therefore, the court hereby orders the court dismisses with prejudice the action in its entirety without any award of attorney's fees or costs. The clerk of the court is directed to administratively close the case. So Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer, for the purposes of this lawsuit, Travis Flores never received a settlement from him, filed the stipulation himself to dismiss the complaint with prejudice against them, and requested and did not receive any award of any attorneys, did not request and did not receive any award of attorney's fees or costs. Just to give the context there, that I feel that the Hollywood Reporter is severely missing. So when Bryan Freedman says that there was no determination of liability on Justin Baldoni or Wayfarer's part, that is true. And even though Caleb Remington settled, there was no determination of liability on his part either. And I feel like I can't make that any clearer. A lot of people say, oh, well, you paid a settlement, therefore you admitted liability, or you were found liable, found guilty, all the kind of buzzwords that they use. No, I cannot tell you how more common it is that someone will just pay someone to go away rather than be dragged through a legal court battle and all the extra, because that will cost more money. It'll be a lot more stressful. It could harm family. It could harm career, even if you didn't do it. And not everyone is all about clearing their name, and I imagine that is that's a thing in Hollywood as well. Like, people will get accused of something knowing that they've got money and knowing that they will just want to shut it down because, the reputation is destroyed before they've seen a day in court. And look what happened to Justin Baldoni in this case against Blake Lively, because the allegations were put into a news article, and before anyone had judged him, and before he responded to the allegations, everyone went straight for oh my God, he's a terrible person. He lost jobs. He had awards rescinded. He had all kinds of threats made against him. The abuse in comments on social media. It was absolutely horrific. It was frenzied. Bryan Freedman did an absolutely stellar job of bringing him back from that, because that should have been a no return point. And Bryan Freedman, between the response, the claim, the complaint they filed, with all of the evidence, really did he undone so much harm to the reputation. But it's such a great example to show what public allegations, if things become public, especially when you're a public figure, or allegations can do. And I can imagine that, although it's just a copyright infringement claim, right? People really are, and I say this so respectfully, but people are, especially Blake Lively supporters, are running with the narrative that because Flores had a terminal illness and has subsequently died, that Justin Baldoni was taking advantage of a man who was too ill to defend himself. I've literally had messages going, "Oh my God, why do you support Justin Baldoni? He was sued by a dead man. He stole a dead man's work." I've had it literally worded like that. That is not my words. I find that gross. Even if it was true, I would find that gross, the way that is being worded. However, that is how it is being worded to me time and time again. I've spent a lot of time on the Travis Flores lawsuit and the Shane Norman one. I've got deep dive series on both of them because people are latching onto the fact that there's some kind of power imbalance, Well, Travis Flores was really, really sick, so he couldn't defend himself. That's not true. That's not true, because he didn't walk into a court as a pro se. You had Bryan Freedman. He did get a settlement. The reason the claims were dismissed against Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer was because Travis Flores had to concede that there was no way that Justin Baldoni could have seen his script for 3 feet distance. He couldn't have seen it. And it is possible that two people get the same idea at the same time. That is perfectly reasonable. Or, in not... I'm just looking for a web page now, or, not too far apart. But 5 feet apart, the reason it's sorry, I'm just looking for a news article. The reason that it's even more important to remember that actually 5 feet apart was based on someone's experience, someone's real life experience, and that was not Travis Flores. That was Claire Weiland, who has also passed away from cystic fibrosis. Justin Baldoni wrote, based the film on her and her own real life experience. So I'm not saying that the film wasn't similar to Travis Flores' story, but that there was another person whose life it was based on. Caleb Remington, I don't know if he really did know of Travis Flores' script and shared it with Wayfarer in his capacity as consultant, not literally shared it like, oh, look at this other guy's script, let's just take from that. I mean, Caleb Remington, could he have had knowledge of Travis Flores' story and have taken inspiration from it that he then shared unknowingly with Wayfarer? That is possible. That may be why he decided to settle. But also, he may have just settled because he didn't want to be dragged through a lawsuit. He has cystic fibrosis too. He may well have not needed the stress. I can imagine that. Healthy people don't need the stress of a lawsuit. And that was a bit of a, I feel like all of this is really important context. And it really annoys me, actually, when mainstream media just don't do it justice. If we're going to tell a story, tell the whole story, right? So we've already started that first half of this Hollywood Reporter article with Travis Flores sued Justin Baldoni. There was a settlement, and now, Bryan Freedman said there was no liability, and now Travis Flores' partner is suing Bryan Freedman for defamation. And when you put all that together, it sounds like, Wayfarer settled. People are misconstruing a settlement as an admission of liability, and it is not, unless it expressly has liability attached to it. Then it is not an admission of liability. It is just a settlement. And then the defamation side, to suggest that the estate of Travis Flores is suing Bryan Freedman for defamation over that quote in the that statement in the news article is just ridiculous, because Freedman is telling the truth. There was no finding of liability. So people will not understand that. So anyway, let's go back to this article. So I'm just going to say as well, the litigation accuses Freedman of publicly defending himself by betraying attorney-client confidences and misrepresenting the merits of Flores' own case in the media. Right. I'm just going to add here, right, Freedman's statement here at the top. I don't believe that there's a breach of any attorney-client confidence or privilege, because he's not commented on anything, any advice that he would have given to Travis Flores. He's not commenting on Travis Flores himself particularly. What he is saying is factual and publicly available information. Over the years, I have learned what great people Justin and Wayfarer are. That's his opinion on Justin and Wayfarer, and he's entitled to get that, whether he's an opposing counsel or not. He's entitled to state that. The Flores case was resolved without any determination of liability on Justin's or Wayfarer or any other defendants, but that is true. I've just gone through all of that with the documents. They are publicly available documents. It's not attorney-client privilege. I already knew that because I looked at it and done a deep dive video on it months ago. And I didn't need Bryan Freedman to tell me that information. It's publicly available information. There was no determination of liability. Since then, it has been further confirmed to me that Justin and Wayfarer are exceedingly honourable and highly ethical. That has nothing to do with Travis Flores, right? Because it says since then, right? That may be the way they've handled the whole Blake Lively situation. That may be Freedman's opinion based on how Wayfarer, how Jamie Heath, how Justin Baldoni, how Steve Sowers handled themselves, conducted themselves with the whole Blake Lively and Stephanie Jones situation. And again, that's an opinion he's perfectly entitled to hold. Just because a lawyer has been an opposing counsel does not mean he cannot then later on represent parties that he once defended a client against later on in a completely separate and unrelated lawsuit. He can do that. Megyn Kelly met him because she was deposed as an opposition witness. And she hated him so much, she hired him. It happens all the time. I had a lot of people say to me, well, why can't he represent Perez against the subpoena? And the reason he couldn't, the reason it was different is because Freedman himself not part of the lawsuit, but his firm was being subpoenaed, and he was part of the allegations that, as Wayfarer's counsel, he was basically recruiting his old clients, his former clients, Megyn Kelly and Perez Hilton in particular, and seeding defamatory, smeary, retaliatory crap, which is not true, but that is why that it would have been a conflict of interest for Freedman to have represented Perez in that situation. So that is why there's a difference there. But we are years on from the Travis Flores lawsuit, and the lawsuit has nothing to do with the whole Blake Lively or Stephanie Jones situation. It's a completely different, separate thing. Let's go back now to the rest of this. So in June, this is where the Hollywood Reporter now is just on a we're going to throw everything we've got at you. In June, a federal judge tossed out Baldoni's Freedman filed $400 million defamation and extortion lawsuit against Lively, her publicist, and the New York Times. Do you know who was not mentioned there? Her husband. Against Lively, her publicist, and the New York Times, which detailed the actress's claims. Nothing about Ryan Reynolds. And yet that's who I believe could be behind this story. Freedman, who's long cultivated a cartoonish reputation for aggressiveness, comparing himself to a pit bull and telling the Hollywood Reporter that if you fuck with my client, you get what you get, was called out in an unrelated June court filing for allegedly attempting to intimidate another lawyer. A dispute over his client Vin Diesel's deposition led to him A dispute over his client Vin Diesel's deposition led to him allegedly cursing out, lunging at, and throwing a mock punch against opposing counsel. Pretty sure Bryan Freedman was... The request for sanctions for that was denied. Freedman in recent years has emerged as one of Hollywood's most prominent litigators. This past summer, he was involved in the multi-billion-dollar contract negotiations between Paramount and South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone. And here we go. Freedman became a lawyer after settling the sexual assault case for $40,000 without admitting liability. Oh, they do point out that no liability was admitted with this settlement. I'm going to just give a bit more context here, though, to that settlement. Freedman didn't actually want to settle. It would have killed his career had he not settled, and he didn't pay $40,000. His parents' insurance, I think it was home insurance or some kind of insurance, paid out. And it's quite often the case where you claim legal fees and legal representation through an insurer, that the insurer will make to some of the decisions, and that could have been the case here. However, he has never admitted this sexual assault. And Blake Lively, of all people, should know that, merely saying that someone has sexually assaulted you or sexually harassed you does not mean it's true. I'm not saying it's not true. I don't know. But his entire career would have been destroyed before it even started had he attempted to fight this in the court through the correct methods. And this is a great example, actually, of what I was saying earlier about why some people just choose to just pay a settlement and just make the whole thing go away, even when whatever they're being accused of, being sued for, is not true, it's false, it didn't happen, right? Some people will do that. And this is why. In 2024, Hollywood Reporter asked the California State Bar whether he notified the organization of this legal history when he sought to join. Moral character reviews are confidential, the State Bar explained, adding, while we are unable to comment on standards that existed in 1991, generally speaking, we can say that today, serious allegations, including those involving sexual assault, would be given serious and appropriate consideration in the moral character review process. So that demonstrates my point. Anyway, I just wanted to add some context and clarification there over what actually happened in the Travis Flores lawsuit. And I don't enjoy doing that particularly, but it's been so wildly misrepresented what happened by Blake Lively supporters. And Travis Flores is not here to say what happened himself, but we still have court records. So I will sit and happily go through the court records and just state what is there publicly as a fact. And it is what it is. Now, why is the partner now coming forward and filing this complaint? Excuse me. I'm not entirely sure, and I will have to see the complaint itself, but I don't think it's going anywhere based on, if I take how it's reported in the Hollywood Reporter, and I do keep a very open mind given the way that they reported it anyway, and other, events during Freedman's career. I don't think that it is going to go anywhere. I don't think Bryan Freedman has done anything wrong. I mean, this Freedman of having inappropriately traded up from a seriously ill client, Flores, to a healthier client, Baldoni. What is that? What are they even accusing him of? It's not Freedman's fault that Travis Flores was, unwell or has passed away. And Justin Baldoni is not the only client that Freedman represents who would have been healthier than Travis Flores at the time and, is still alive. Vin Diesel would have been a healthier client. Again, I'm trying to say that as respectfully as possible, but I'm trying to demonstrate how ridiculous that is. Is Freedman not supposed to take any clients unless they are incredibly ill? Is that what we're saying here? Otherwise, he might get, complained about to the state bar and sued. That is just such a ridiculous suggestion, right? That he has not traded up. And there is nothing that bars Freedman from taking on clients, who he has previously represented a different client in opposition. So that's why this is why I was so frustrated, right? Because that is just absolute crap. And it's really frustrating to see that. And that's why I'm skeptical as to the timing and why has this suddenly come about now in the middle of this lawsuit when stuff is about to get juicy with Van Zandt when we're about to have the Steve Sarowitz recording released. And again, as I've explained before, there was no breach of attorney-client privilege, and there was no misrepresentation of the merits of Flores' own case in the media. In fact, if anyone misrepresented the case, it would be the Hollywood Reporter here, because they've said their settlement. They were right. Yes, there was a settlement. They implied that it was implied by admission that it was Baldoni and Wayfarer who paid it, because it didn't say a settlement from a different party, Caleb Remington. And this is all information that is publicly available that the Hollywood Reporter could have got hold of if they really tried, if they weren't trying to do a hit piece. They could have put all that context, but they didn't. So here am I having to sit and do their job for them, and it pisses me off. It really does. It pisses me off so much that mainstream media are really prepared, as much as Judge Lyman, to bend over at Blake Lively's behest. Well, I don't know if it's a behest. No, that's not the right word. They just seem to be working. They're writing their stories in a way that paints a false picture, a misleading picture. And, it makes Wayfarer and Baldoni look awful when they are not. And it makes Blake Lively look like a saint who's justified in bringing this legal action, because look, Travis Flores once brought a legal action and got a settlement, so he was right to sue Baldoni. Or, and they say the same thing, they represent the Shane Norman lawsuit too, where there was also no settlement from Baldoni from Wayfarer. And even Shane Norman has gone on Reddit and said, can people stop dragging me into it? We're referring to the Lively people who constantly bring up the fact that Justin Baldoni was sued by him. Justin Baldoni is still a client of Shane Norman's. There's no bad blood between them. One deep dive I haven't done, and I will get around to it one day, is seen as Lively supporters really, like to dig their hooks into copyright infringement claims or lawsuits, where Baldoni and Wayfarer have been sued by someone. It's not like that hasn't happened to Ryan Reynolds or Blake Lively. In particular, Ryan Reynolds and Aviation Gin were sued by Marilyn Starkloff for copyright infringement. They paid the settlement, them, not someone else, not home insurance, them. And I haven't got around to doing it, but I've had to defend that story time and time again. I've even had a message from Marilyn Starkloff herself thanking me for accurately representing her lawsuit, because right before Van Zandt was exposed, people were convinced that the Starkloff lawsuit was where the Van Zandt subpoena really was, although it wasn't Van Zandt. That's where they thought the subpoena that was issued to Stephanie Jones was, and it wasn't. I've been through every page in that entire docket, and there's a lot of them, and it was a genuine lawsuit. They stole images from someone else's work, and then just used it as their own without crediting her, which is a big deal to a photographer, by the way. Being credited for something is a massive deal. So, and without paying her. and they had paid her for previous work, but then they started, you know, using pieces of work without credit and without payment. So yeah, there's that, you know. But double standards and everything. Blake Lively supporters don't care about that. They latch on to Travis Flores in particular because, as I said before, the way they frame it to me is this is a guy who's sick, a guy who's now passed away. Now, well, that's not how they phrase it. They are far more disrespectful than I am. But they don't refer to anyone that's not got some kind of, I mean, Shane Norman he often gets referred to as, Justin Bolden, and he was sued by a black guy because he's a black man. And that's what they latch on to. They latch on to, oh, well, there's some way that someone can be discriminated, or they're weaker for some reason, that something's disproportionate somewhere. That's why people are, you find that they're less interested to debate this, cases like the Starkcloth and Aviation Gin lawsuit, or any of the other Bryan Reynolds or Blake Lively lawsuits. Anyway, so I will try, once I get a hold of the actual complaint, though, I will do a proper video on that as well. So then I've got the actual words of Travis Flores' estate, then see what it is. There may be something there that is not in this article, which will give more context that makes a bit more sense. And I'm quite happy to revise my opinion if that's the case. But based on this reporting by the Hollywood Reporter, it's a frivolous lawsuit that is going nowhere. I will also do a video as soon as that's recording from Steve Sarowitz is out. I will do a recording on that. I'm hoping it's Stephanie Jones. I mean, I feel like we're going to get a transcript, not audio, but I would be so chuffed if it was Stephanie Jones, right, and it was audio, because I really want to hear this southern twang that I keep being told about in Wayfarer's responses and Abel's responses. But we'll see. That's it for me. So take care, and I will speak to you all again really soon.